By now, you've no doubt heard about the controversy surrounding the opening ceremony for the Olympics in Paris this last weekend. How, as Christians, are we supposed to deal with that? What should our response be? Well, I want to talk about that, and I also want to talk about somewhere I saw God in the Olympics this year. We'll talk about that in just a moment. Welcome to the Worship Homestead. My name is Nathan Smith. Thank you for joining me. Today we're going to be talking about something that's not quite worship related, but is pretty big news right now, and that is the opening ceremonies for the Olympics in Paris. You probably already know, but quite a stir was raised when during one of the scenes, of the part of the opening ceremonies, there was this long table that had drag queens and people in various states of nudity, and then in the middle of that was this blue guy with almost nothing on and yellow hair, and it was all bizarre and weird, and it looked a lot like a bashing of the Last Supper by Leonardo da Vinci, so a pot shot at Christianity. What's going on there? Well, before we get to that, I want to give you something. If you go to my website, blueprintsounds.com, you can get access to my free worship training bundle called the Worship Booster Pack. It has PDF manuals and online classes and everything from worship songwriting to how to build a better band and much more, available for free on my website, or click on the link nearby, blueprintsounds.com/worship booster pack. So since that opening ceremony, people have gone crazy online, heavily criticizing that opening ceremony, and especially that scene and all of the weirdness that was happening. Well, the International Olympic Community came out with a statement online, and they said, I'll quote them exactly, "If anyone was offended by certain scenes, this was completely unintentional, and they were sorry." So after the criticism, then people are coming and saying, oh, no, it wasn't the Last Supper that they were parodying. It was this 17th century painting by this Dutchman about Greek gods, because it's not like they were actually, doing something to look like the Last Supper and Jesus and his disciples. That blue guy is the god Dionysus, and so it's from that painting. Well, I looked up who Dionysus is, and Dionysus was the god of wine, merrymaking, fertility, what else do we have? Insanity, ritual madness, religious ecstasy, and theater. Actually, all of Western theater started off as ritual ceremonies dedicated to the god Dionysus. And when the Romans conquered Greece, a lot of that Greek mythology became Roman mythology. So Dionysus became Bacchus, and that's where we get the term Bacchanalia. And Bacchanalia was this drunken, just citywide sexual immorality of a festival that eventually got so out of hand that it had to be shut down. That's how bad the Bacchanalia got. So on one level, it's not that much more comforting to know, oh, it was a scene dedicated to a demon god of sexual liberation. But there's also a tactic at play here. So Christians get upset that this scene looks like a scene from the Last Supper, which is being parodied and mocked. And then they're told, no, that's not what it is at all. It's actually this other painting. And if you were more cultured, you'd understand it. I'm so sorry that you're offended, but that just proves that you're a Luddite. Well, you get mocked twice. You get mocked once for being a Christian, and then you get mocked again for not understanding what's really going on here. It's a tactic. It's a tactic of the elite. What they're doing is they are denigrating you by saying, oh, you wouldn't understand, and the fact that you don't understand what we're really trying to do in our art just proves that you're a knuckle dragger. But beyond that, many Christians are upset about the fact that we have this international sporting event that happens every 4 years, but it is the biggest sporting event in the world. Whoever wins the 100-meter dash in the Olympics, we call that the world's fastest man. So it is the pinnacle of human achievement in sport. And so we wondered, why did they intrude into this thing that should be unifying for the entire world? Everybody gets to come and, bring their best athletes. Why is it that they had to ruin it by imposing their worldview and their sexual preferences? Why did they push it on us? The truth of the matter is that it's the other way around. They did not butt into our thing. They didn't intrude into our sandbox. we participated in their sandbox. And that sandbox is humanism. You probably know this, but the first Olympics were dedicated to the god Zeus. Scholars believe that the Olympics probably started around 776 BC, and those first games began with religious ceremonies dedicating the whole thing to the god Zeus. That's how it started. And if you had any questions about who Zeus was, in the book of Revelation, John writes to the church in Pergamum, and he says in the prophecy, "I know where you live, where Satan has his throne." Well, what's in Pergamum? In Pergamum was a temple built to Zeus and Athena, and that temple had on it depictions of giants fighting Olympian gods. Now, it's not in Pergamum anymore. It's been dismantled and taken to Berlin, where it lives in a museum. But that was the temple that John was referencing as a temple to Zeus, which he said, which is where Satan has his throne. So he goes by a lot of different names: Baal, Beelzebub, Zeus, Satan. It's all the same stuff. We in the West, because we have this tradition that's based on Greek thought, we tend to think, even though we kept all of the traditions like the amphitheater and the stadium and the philosophy and the architecture, we left all the gods behind. All the mythology, well, that's not really real, but we did keep all of the stuff that the Greeks thought up. We're in that heritage. And what we're now realizing is that it all came together. It was a package deal. We didn't leave it behind like we thought we did. Let's jump ahead to the modern Olympics. The modern Olympics got started in the late 1800s, and the guy who gets the credit for, getting the ball rolling is a Frenchman called Pierre de Coubertin. And he laid out what the Olympics should look like and how it was going to run. He's the one that came up with the idea for the opening and closing ceremonies, the idea that there should be medals, that there should be an anthem. We'll talk about that in a second. But he wanted to imbue the Olympics with a religious component, and I'll quote him directly. "The first essential characteristic of the modern Olympics is that, like the Olympics of ancient Greece, they constitute a religion. Through exercise, the athlete of classical times sculpted his physique much as an artist chisels a statue. And in doing so, he was honoring his gods. In modern times, the athlete in his achievement honors his country, his race, and his national flag. I think, therefore, that I was right to restore a religious sentiment as one of the fundamental principles of the Renaissance Olympics." So among all of the other pageantry that they wanted with that first Olympics, they wanted an anthem for the Olympics. And so they had two Greek guys, one composer and one lyricist, one poet, create the anthem for the Olympics. And here's the first line of the Olympic anthem. "O ancient spirit, immortal, pure father of the beautiful, the great, and the true." Now that sounds sufficiently vague to where it could mean anything, but it's not Jehovah, because at the end of the song we read this: "And thy pilgrim is running to this here temple." Well, that temple is in Athens because that's where the first modern games was held. And so, again, this song, this anthem, which has been sung since like the 80s on at every single Olympic Games, is dedicating the Olympic Games to whatever or whoever this god is, whether it's Zeus or Apollo or Athena. I'm not exactly sure, but it's not Jehovah. Whatever demon it is, it's not the God that we serve. And if you're a Christian, you should know that. You should know that the Olympics weren't made for you. They were never made for you, the ancient one or the modern one. And I say that as somebody who grew up loving the Olympics. I was really into gymnastics as a kid. I remember the Atlanta Olympics. I would sit in the splits and watch the gymnastics. And then during commercials, I would go do handsprings and roundoffs and cartwheels. Like, I was really into it. I remember Athens. I remember Sydney. And this time around, I just wasn't into it. I don't know why. I don't know if my spirit discerned that something was going to be weird. But I didn't watch the opening ceremonies. I probably won't watch any of the games. But you need to know, as a Christian, that the Olympics aren't for you. And that hurts a little bit to acknowledge, because what we're finding now in 2024 is that a lot of the things that we thought were neutral territory aren't as neutral as we were led to believe. During those 80s and 90s, and when I watched it, it was muted. The religious undertones of the Olympics were muted sufficiently to where you wouldn't pick up on it. Yeah, the opening ceremonies were always just a little bit weird, but they weren't that weird. It was tamped down enough to where people could get attached to the games. They could love the games. They could enjoy it every 4 years. It became part of culture. You know, you get the Wheaties box and the Dream Team, and it just became something that you could aspire to if you were a kid. You could look up to those Olympians because they were the best of the best. Well, over the last few years, we've started to see those Olympic ceremonies get weirder and weirder. Probably London 2012 is one of those where, if you remember it, and it was weird. And if you go back and look at the opening ceremony, it was ghoulish. It was dark. Like, what is going on here? Well, things are starting to come to fruition. What we thought was neutral is not neutral. There has always been a struggle between the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and Baal, or Beelzebub, or Zeus, or Apollo, or whatever you want to call it. You want to know what else was in the opening ceremony in Paris that didn't get as much screen time as the blue dude? Well, there was a rider on a pale horse. That's kind of weird. And there was a golden cow's head near the flags in the opening ceremony. That seems kind of obviously a shout out to Molech. Here's the point. As Christians, we need to start breaking down in our mind the wall between the secular and the sacred. For a long time, several generations of Americans have lived their life Monday through Saturday in one realm and then Sunday in another, and we never thought that the two really met one another. And then, in 2024, you turn on your television and you see a ceremony dedicated to demon worship. What do you do with that? There is no dividing line between the secular and the sacred. That's the world that the apostles grew up in. The cities that they preached in, the places where they went had idols and demons on every street corner. There was no dividing line between the secular and the sacred, and so we shouldn't be surprised when it intrudes into our life. There's one other thing that I want to draw your attention to with the Olympics, and that is what man can't do. You see, the whole idea of the Olympics is based around humanism. And the Greeks gave us humanism. They love the human ideal, the ideal form. That's what the Olympics was all about. And in their philosophy and in their sculpture, all of it is about man being the metric. He is the source for all things. Whereas with Christians, God is the source of life and he is the measure of all things. We measure up against him, not him against us. Humanism makes man the center of the world, and that's exactly what the Olympics is. It's a celebration of human achievement. But there's some things that man can't do. Man can make a multi-million-dollar sporting event every 4 years and broadcast it all over the world and exalt the god Dionysus and trans stuff and all sorts of weird, crazy occult symbology and make a mockery of Christianity. Men can do that. But here's what they can't do. Every Olympics that you've ever watched and that I've watched in our lifetime begins the same way. And not with the ceremony. It starts with the lighting of the Olympic torch. That always happens in Olympia, Greece. So, this lady who is the high priestess, I'm not making this up, surrounded by her Vestal virgins, takes a torch and she asks the god Apollo for help to light the torch with the help of the sun, because Apollo is the sun god. So they have this bowl-shaped mirror that focuses the rays of the sun. She sticks the torch into the bowl and the sun lights the flame, which then she hands to the next guy, and then it travels all over the world. Yeah, definitely pagan. Except on this occasion, it didn't work. It was too cloudy. So they had to use their backup plan, which is they had already lit a flame during one of their dress rehearsals from the sun. They just go straight to that urn, they light it from there, and then they're on their way. But isn't it fantastic? It didn't quite work out this year. And then, after months of travel, when it's time to take it to Paris, it rains during the opening ceremony. Our God is the one whom the wind and the waves obey. So for all of the things that man can do, guess what he can't do? He can't give himself a sunny day when he wants it. Here's my hunch, and I can't prove it. We won't know until eternity, but I think somebody or some people prayed. Some people who know their God said, God, show yourself more powerful than all of the gods of the Greek mythology, pagan, humanism, all of that grossness, all the different names that you can think of for Satan and his demons. And God said, watch. That's what I think happened. Because no matter what they try and do and what they try and broadcast on the air, they can't make a sunny day. So no matter what happens and how man tries to exalt himself or have a ceremony dedicated to some weird god or some other name for Satan, just know that God always has a better card to play. He has never been outdone. Hey, I hope that video helps you. And again, if you need help with your worship team, go to my website, blueprintsounds.com/worship booster pack. Until next week, God bless and goodbye.